Taoiseach, children with physical and sensory disabilities need all the supports that are humanly possible available to them so that they can progress to as independent a life as possible. And there's volumes, I suppose, of research at this stage showing that the fact that kids that receive early intervention, that receive the supports at the earliest possible date, benefit enormously from it. The Irish Wheelchair Association administers the personal assistance scheme, where they have a person-centred approach. They have pioneered the way that the service is meant to be delivered, and they connect with each individual and have a direct input into their needs and their assessments. Now, there's no need to give the huge benefits that personal assistants have been to kids with intellectual or sensory or physical disabilities. But unfortunately, there are many kids out there who are not receiving these supports, the supports that are vital. And we have cases where parents, the length and the breadth of the country, and I'm sure Taoiseach and every deputy inside here have been dealing with parents of kids with special needs, trying to fight for services in terms of personal assistance, either in the national school, in the secondary schools, or indeed in preschools. And we look at the hours that have been given through the Wheelchair Association. The maximum that have been given maybe is 4 to 6 hours, which is hugely and absolutely inadequate. And the point I would make is that the government, in the programme for government, outlines, at length in relation to commitments to improve the lives of people with disabilities, and goes through all that should be done to help them. Now, if we look at the HSE plan for 2016 alone, there is a target for 1.3 million extra hours for 2016. Now, this compares with 1.4 million actual hours in 2015. So therefore, before we start at all, there is a reduction in the services by 100,000 personal assistance hours, even when the amount of kids that are coming on stream that need more personal assistance is growing at all times. Now, what I would challenge you, Taoiseach, is that it is grossly hypocritical to have a commitment in the programme for government which clearly says that we are looking at getting better supports and access for kids in particular with disabilities, and looking at what is actually in the 2016 plan versus the 2015 plan. And you have given various commitments in relation to this. I am challenging you to look very seriously at the provision of the personal assistance, particularly through the Wheelchair Association. I have many cases that I could mention, families that are looking for supports right throughout my own constituency, and as I've said, any other deputy can as well. But it is hypocritical to say that you are looking for, and I think, improve the lives of people with disabilities through better access, supports and independence. And clearly there is a cut in the number of hours that are there for 2016 versus 2016. Can the Minister, the Taoiseach, confirm that these cuts will be reversed, and also confirm that the allocation of personal assistance hours will be dramatically increased in 2017? And if you take the situation where 4 or 6 hours are being allocated to a kid going into primary school or going into preschool, if that was increased to 8 or 9 hours, it would give them a massive start in terms of what they have to challenge going forward. So I'm looking for you, first of all, to confirm that you would reverse the cuts in it, acknowledge that there is a cut in the services this year, and acknowledge that there needs to be greater flexibility to the Wheelchair Association to provide extra hours to kids who need it either in preschool or in primary school.
Thank you, Deputy. The topic you raise is an extremely important one. I have to agree with you that, of course, early intervention services are critical, particularly for children with special needs, whether that's either intellectual or physical supports that are needed. The programme for government commits to supporting children in these circumstances. For the first time ever, we will now have the kind of supports that children with a disability who are attending preschool will be able to get under the ECCE programme. That's a major new initiative to make sure that children have access to the kind of services that they get, so that, for example, SNAs can be available in the preschool setting. And the government, as you know, recently agreed to an extra 860 special needs assistants. Now, that's going to be of huge help to the children that you describe when they're in either preschool or primary school. The 500 million that's been allocated to the health services, and in particular the 31 million that Minister McGrath has got to support and improve disability services, will deal precisely with the group of children, indeed as well as adults in need of support, and particularly those moving from transition from school, for example, to perhaps daycare centres, will support that group to make sure that services are available for them. So the government is committed to early intervention, to putting supports in place for the children that you describe. There's also an initiative which was announced during the previous government, when Minister Varadkar announced extra funding for speech therapy and occupational therapy. You raised the point in particular in relation to personal assistance, and that the Irish Wheelchair Association have some concerns in relation to that. I will bring the points that you raised to Deputy McGrath and ask him to respond directly to you. But the general context is one of increased funding for the health services, a special focus on extra funding for disability services, increases in supports during the early years to children who have special needs, whether those are intellectual or physical. That's the context, and that's what this government is committed to, and that's what we're committed to in the programme for government. I will ask the Minister to respond to you directly in relation to the personal assistance scheme, but my expectation would be that the supports will be available to children who need that kind of support because of the commitments that are in the programme for government, and because of the focus and the priority that the government has given to increasing funding for the health sector. There are greater demands, as I said earlier in the week. There are higher attendances, but the needs, thankfully, of many of these children are now being identified at an earlier time, earlier in their lives, and we do need to be getting the supports into children with special needs at an earlier time. And that's why I really do welcome what we're doing in relation to preschool and children with disabilities having access to supports in preschool as well as in primary school.
Deputy Moynihan.
The practicality, the reality on the ground is that there's a huge, any parents with kids with either physical or intellectual disabilities are fighting the system on a continuous basis. You know, from early stages, they're fighting the system for services for their kids. And, you know, to give us the line that, you know, that there's more money available, you mentioned in relation to SNAs and more SNAs coming through. You know, I'm sorry to say that's not what's happening on the ground. You know, you mentioned in relation to speech and language and occupational therapy, you know, there is a whole series of questions that could be brought in relation to that. There's a whole series, there could be hours of debate in relation to it, and every deputy could bring their own experiences in it. It is hugely difficult. The waiting list for occupational therapy, for speech therapy, for that, all of that there is huge waiting list, and parents will come into saying a year and a half, and the services are needed now. Go back to the point in relation to the point you made in relation to the SNAs. Could you tease that out for me? Because I think that, you know, the reality is, and you've signed up, we've all signed up to conventions, UN and everything else, and we've all the theory is correct. The reality is that there's a huge concern out there, and there is a lack of supports for kids with either physical or intellectual disabilities, whether they're trying to access them in primary school or in preschool or on to second level education.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Look, parents of children with special needs, as I say, whether intellectual or physical, should not have to fight the system in the way that you describe. And our intention is to improve the services. Let me give you an example of what is happening. In the 2016 National Service Plan, the Health Service Executive's priority is to protect the level of services provided in 2015 and to provide 1.3 million hours of personal assistance services and 2.6 million hours of home support to over 2,000 adults with a disability. So they're precise figures in relation to the improvement in personal assistance hours. But clearly, parents of children with a disability, historically in this country, have had to fight too hard for services. We know that. We now, in an improving economic situation, are in a position where more services are being provided. That's the reality. There are 850 extra SNAs, and parents out there who need special needs assistance for their children in schools will see the benefit of that in the coming school term, because extra money has been allocated. There's over €1 billion now in our budget for special needs assistance.